The midday sun shimmered above Route 49, painting the cracked asphalt gold. The sound of engines echoed faintly from down the valley, low, deep, thunder-like. Most townsfolk of Ridgefield knew that sound meant one thing: the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club was passing through. But for 12-year-old Grace Parker, it meant something else entirely: opportunity. With a basket full of homemade cookies tied with ribbons and a paper sign that read $2 for kindness, she stood outside the dusty gas station, her ponytail whipping in the warm wind. Her mom's voice echoed in her head, "Grace, don't wander near the bikers." But Grace wasn't scared. She'd spent the last week baking and selling cookies door to door to raise money for her little brother's surgery, and this was the last place in town she hadn't tried. When the rumble grew louder, she gripped her basket tighter. The air seemed to vibrate as 12 Harley-Davidsons rolled in, chrome glinting like armor under the sun. Black leather vests, tattoos, skulls, the kind of sight that made grown men cross the street. Grace swallowed hard, but didn't move. One of the bikers killed his engine and removed his helmet. His name patch read Ridge, and the look in his steel-gray eyes made her heart stutter. "You lost, kid?" he asked, voice low and rough. Grace shook her head. "No, sir. I'm here to sell cookies." The entire crew laughed, but it wasn't cruel laughter. It was disbelief. Ridge leaned on his bike, squinting at her.
"Cookies to us?"
Grace nodded, her voice small but steady. "They're for my brother, Charlie. He's sick. I'm trying to raise enough money for his medicine." The laughter faded. The wind carried only the ticking of cooling engines. Behind Ridge, a tall biker named Tank, built like a wall, muttered, "Kid's got guts." Grace held out her basket, arms trembling but determined. Ridge reached in, grabbed a cookie, and bit into it. His brows lifted. "Damn, that's actually good." A ripple of chuckles spread through the group. Another biker, Fox, handed her a $20 bill. "Keep the change," he said gruffly, pretending not to meet her eyes. One by one the rest followed, handing over bills far beyond the price of cookies. Grace's small hands could barely hold the cash as she blinked in astonishment. "Thank you. You didn't have to—" Ridge interrupted softly. "Kid, sometimes you just remind people what real strength looks like." That afternoon, she sold every cookie she'd made. As the bikers prepared to leave, Ridge asked where she lived. "Old Parker Farm, near the hill," she said. "My mom's there." Ridge nodded once. "We'll remember that." He revved his Harley, and the Iron Saints rode off into the horizon, leaving behind dust, engine echoes, and a little girl with hope glimmering in her eyes. That night, Grace told her mom what happened. "You what?" Her mother gasped, dropping her dish towel. "Grace, those men are dangerous." But Grace shook her head. "No, they weren't. They were nice. They helped." Her mom sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Honey, people like that, they don't just help for no reason." But deep down, even she couldn't ignore the envelope Grace held, stuffed with over $200 in cash. For a 12-year-old's cookies, it was unthinkable. The next morning, the family woke to the distant rumble of engines again. Grace ran to the window. The Iron Saints were back, 30 of them this time, lined along the old road like soldiers of chrome and leather. Her mother's heart raced. "Grace, get inside." But Ridge dismounted and walked to the porch, removing his helmet respectfully. "Ma'am," he said, "we're not here for trouble. We're here for your little man." Behind Ridge, 2 bikers unloaded a box from a pickup truck, medical supplies, groceries, and even toys. Grace's mom froze, disbelief washing over her face. "What is this?" Ridge looked her in the eyes. "A thank you. That cookie she sold us reminded us of home, reminded us that family still means something." Grace stood beside him, clutching her basket. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. Ridge knelt down, his rough hands resting gently on the edge of the basket. Kid, when you ride long enough, you see a lot of bad in the world. But sometimes you meet someone who reminds you they're still good. You did that? Neighbors peeked out from windows, shocked to see leather-clad bikers unloading food and blankets instead of causing chaos. One woman whispered, "There, helping?" And by the end of the morning, the entire Parker porch was covered in donations. As Ridge and his crew prepared to leave, Grace handed him one last cookie, the smallest, slightly burnt one. "This one's free," she said with a shy grin. Ridge looked at her for a long moment before tucking it carefully into his vest pocket. "I'll keep it for luck." The engines roared back to life, echoing across the fields as the Iron Saints disappeared once again down the highway. That night, as Grace helped her brother eat soup, her mom sat quietly at the window watching the road. "Maybe I was wrong about them," she murmured. "Maybe angels just wear leather sometimes." Grace smiled softly. "They said they'd come back, Mom, and in that small farmhouse on the edge of nowhere, one act of kindness had connected two worlds that were never supposed to meet. 3 days passed after the Iron Saints' visit, and Ridgefield buzzed with rumors. Some said the bikers were hiding stolen goods. Others claimed they were running charity scams. But Grace knew the truth. Every morning she watched her brother Charlie smile a little wider because of the food they'd brought, the new medicine, the hope. Yet at school, whispers followed her. "That's the girl who hangs around gangsters," one classmate sneered. Grace didn't argue. She just kept her head down. That afternoon, as she walked home with her empty cookie basket, she saw something new. A patch of black tire marks outside the fence, and an envelope taped to the gatepost. Inside, a single folded paper read, "Keep baking, kid. You've got more heart than most grown men I've met. Ridge." Her lips trembled into a smile. Beneath the note, tucked neatly inside, was a crisp $500 bill and a small silver pin engraved with the Iron Saints logo. 2 angel wings wrapped around a gear. Grace held it tight, not realizing she was holding the beginning of something much bigger. By the end of the week, her story had reached the local newspaper. "12-year-old cookie seller gets help from biker club," the headline read. The article painted the Iron Saints as kind-hearted outlaws, but not everyone liked that. The sheriff, Bill Harlow, had clashed with Ridge's crew before. "Those men aren't heroes," he said at the diner. "They just found a way to make trouble look noble." That same night, 2 cruisers rolled down the road toward the Parker farmhouse. Grace was helping Charlie draw at the table when the red and blue lights flashed through the window. Her mother's breath hitched. "Stay inside," she whispered, stepping out to the porch. Sheriff Harlow removed his hat. "Ma'am, we've had reports the Iron Saints might be using your property as a drop site for illegal shipments. Mind if we look around?" Grace's mother's voice trembled. "You're mistaken. Those men helped us." "Ma'am," he said, tightening his jaw, "those men don't help. They use—" Grace's small voice cut through the tension from the doorway. "That's not true." "They brought food when no one else would." The sheriff turned startled. For a second, he saw nothing but fierce conviction in that little girl's eyes. "Go back inside, Missy." But the damage was done. The Iron Saints would hear about this. That night, Ridge got the call. He was at the club garage, fixing a broken chain on Tank's bike, when Lucky, the oldest member, greybeard and all, walked in holding his phone. "Boss, Sheriff Harlow's been sniffing around the Parker place. Says we're hiding something." Ridge wiped his hands on a rag, eyes narrowing. "The only thing we hid there was kindness." He slammed his wrench onto the table. "Mount up." Within 20 minutes, the quiet town of Ridgefield trembled again, this time under the thunder of 50 engines roaring down the highway. The Iron Saints didn't ride for vengeance. They rode for clarity. When they reached the Parker farm, they didn't storm in or shout. Ridge simply walked up to the sheriff's cruiser parked at the gate, his boots crunching gravel. "If you've got questions, you ask me," he said evenly. The sheriff stepped out, hand near his holster. "You threatening an officer, Ridge?" Ridge didn't blink. "No, I'm standing between you and a 12-year-old girl you just scared half to death." The air crackled. The bikers behind Ridge stayed silent, helmets reflecting the red lights. The sheriff hesitated, then backed off. "You tell your men to stay away from this town," he muttered. Ridge leaned in close. "You tell your men to remember what real protection looks like." The sheriff left, tires spitting dust, his authority shaken. The next morning, Grace woke up to find her front yard full of motorcycles, lined neatly along the dirt road, gleaming under the morning sun. Her heart leapt, and she rushed outside barefoot. Ridge was there, talking quietly to her mother. He smiled when he saw Grace. "Morning, Cookie Queen." She giggled, cheeks pink. "You came back? Told you we would." Behind him, Tank and Lucky unpacked boxes of school supplies, tools, and paint. "What's all that?" Grace asked. Ridge grinned. "Your mom said your barn roof's leaking. Figured we'd fix it before winter hits." Grace's mom's voice wavered. "Why are you doing all this for us?" Ridge looked up at her, eyes steady. "Because she reminded us who we used to be, before the world told us we were monsters." For the next few hours, the air was filled with hammering, laughter, and stories. Grace brought out lemonade and cookies, and the bikers drank, worked, and joked like family. Even the neighbors who had whispered before came to watch, some bringing food, some just watching in awe. It wasn't charity. It was community being reborn. By sundown, the barn stood tall again, its roof shining like new tin armor. The Iron Saints parked their bikes in a half-circle, the sun painting their leather vests gold. Grace climbed onto the porch rail, holding a plate of cookies. "You guys fixed everything," she said, voice trembling with gratitude. Ridge crouched to meet her eye level. "Nah, kid, you did. We just followed your lead." Then, from behind him, Lucky lit a flare and planted it in the dirt. "Brothers," Ridge called, raising his arm, "we ride with purpose. And today this family's under our watch." The flare burned bright against the dusk. 50 bikers lifted their helmets in silent salute, not to Ridge, but to Grace Parker. Her mother's tears caught the orange light as she whispered, "They really are angels, aren't they?" Grace smiled softly, holding her silver pin tight. "They always were. People just never looked close enough." For a few days, peace settled over the Parker farm like morning fog. Grace baked every evening, sending baskets of cookies to the clubhouse, where the men would joke that she was their official chef. Ridgefield, however, didn't stay quiet for long. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, whispers in the grocery store, murmurs at the church steps. "Those bikers are moving in. They're using that poor widow to clean their image. Next thing you know, they'll turn the farm into a meth lab." When Grace and her mom went to the town market that weekend, the stares followed them. One woman pulled her child aside and whispered, "Stay close." "That's the biker girl." Grace pretended not to hear, but her shoulders drooped. Her mother placed a protective hand on her back. "Let them talk," she whispered. "We know the truth." But Grace didn't feel brave anymore. That evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, she sat on the porch holding her now faded Iron Saint's pin. Her heart ached. "Maybe if I stop talking about them," she said softly, "people will stop looking at us like we're bad." Ridge's voice broke the silence. He was leaning against his Harley at the end of the path. "And let them change your story?" he asked gently. "No, kid. The truth doesn't need approval. It just needs someone brave enough to keep telling it." The next morning, trouble found them anyway. The sheriff returned, this time with a city official. "Mrs. Parker," he said stiffly, "we've received complaints about illegal activity, noise violations, possible vandalism." You'll need to come down to the station for questioning. Grace's mom froze, panic flooding her face. This is insane, she whispered. You have no right. I have plenty of right, the sheriff interrupted. Grace ran to the fence as the sheriff escorted her mother toward the patrol car. Mama! She cried, gripping the wooden post. Ridge was already there, engine roaring to life. Within minutes, a convoy of black bikes streamed down the hill like a wave of thunder. The sheriff didn't flinch, not yet, but the sight of 20 bikers surrounding his cruiser sent a ripple through the air. Ridge dismounted, his boots crunching the gravel. She's not going anywhere until you show a warrant, he said calmly. The official sputtered, We're just investigating. Then investigate with respect. Ridge's voice was low but carried like distant thunder. The sheriff tried to stand taller. You don't scare me. Ridge stepped closer, face unreadable. Good. Then you'll understand this. The day you scare a 12-year-old girl to make a point, you stop being law and start being noise. The official backed off first. We'll review this, he muttered, retreating to the car. The sheriff followed reluctantly, eyes hard. You're crossing lines, Ridge. Maybe, Ridge said, watching him go. But at least I know which side of the line I'm standing on. That night, Ridgefield divided clean down the middle. Half the town demanded the Iron Saints leave. The other half, people who'd quietly received help from the club for years, stayed silent, afraid to speak up. Grace saw the fear in her mother's eyes as headlights passed their windows at night, slow and menacing. The next morning, someone had spray-painted trash lovers on their barn wall. Ridge showed up before sunrise, wiping the graffiti clean himself. They did this because they're scared, he said quietly, scrubbing with a rag until his knuckles bled. And scared people say stupid things. Grace helped him repaint the wall, her little hands clutching the brush. Why do people hate you so much? She asked. Ridge looked at her, the lines on his face deepening. Because we used to be who they think we still are. But people can change, Grace. You just got to give them a chance to prove it. By the time the sun rose, the wall was clean again, brighter than before. Grace smiled proudly. See? Fixed. Ridge chuckled softly. Guess we're both good at fixing things. The next weekend brought the town fair, an annual event everyone attended. Grace begged her mom to let her bring cookies to sell again. Maybe this time, she said, people will see we're not bad. Her mother hesitated, but eventually nodded. Grace set up a small table near the fair entrance with a cardboard sign. Homemade cookies, $2 each. Proceeds for local families. The morning was slow. Parents steered their kids away. The sheriff's wife even muttered, Shame, using a child to clean up a biker gang's image. Grace's eyes welled up, but before she could pack up, the sound of engines rolled in, deep, confident, unmistakable. The Iron Saints. 50 motorcycles parked neatly along the gravel road, their riders dismounting in full view of the stunned crowd. Ridge walked up to Grace's table, dropped $100 bill and said, We'll take everything you've got, kid. The others followed, cheering, laughing, holding up cookies like trophies. The whole fair stopped to watch. Then something shifted. A local farmer, the one the Saints had secretly helped after his barn fire, stepped forward. Put me down for 10 boxes, he said. Then a teacher. Then the mayor's wife. Within minutes, Grace's cookies were gone. Laughter rippled through the air, real and contagious. By afternoon, the girl who'd been shunned became the symbol of something new, a bridge between fear and understanding. That night, as fireworks painted the sky over Ridgefield, Grace sat on a hay bale surrounded by the Iron Saints. Tank handed her a soda. Lucky played harmonica by the fire. Ridge leaned on his bike, watching her with quiet pride. Told you, he said. Truth doesn't need approval. Grace grinned. Guess it just needs cookies. The men roared with laughter. When the fireworks faded, Ridge crouched beside her. Grace! There's something we wanted to ask." He reached into his vest and pulled out a small leather jacket, perfectly sized for her. On the back in gold stitching were the words, "Honor Ride, Iron Saints Family." Her eyes widened. "For me?" Ridge nodded. "You earned it. You showed this whole town what family really means." Grace ran to her mom, spinning in the jacket, the biggest smile of her life lighting her face. Her mom's voice cracked as she whispered, "You've given her hope again." Ridge smiled softly. "No, ma'am. She gave it to us first." The engines roared again under the stars, but this time they didn't sound like thunder. They sounded like belonging. A week after the fair, Ridgefield wasn't the same. People waved at the Iron Saints now. The sheriff, still bitter, couldn't stop it. Kindness had done what rules never could. Grace's story spread online after a local journalist posted a video of her giving out cookies in her new leather jacket. The Cookie Kid and the Iron Saints, that's what they called her. Overnight, messages poured in from other towns, thanking the club for changing hearts, but not everyone wanted that change. Late one evening, as the sun sank behind the fields, a pickup truck screeched past the Parker house, hurling a beer bottle through the window. The crash startled Grace and her mom. Charlie screamed. Outside, laughter faded into the distance. Grace's mother stood frozen, glass glittering on the floor. Grace's hands shook. Why would they do that? Before her mother could answer, headlights swept across the yard again, but this time it wasn't a truck. It was motorcycles. The Iron Saints. Ridge was at the front, jaw tight, eyes burning with quiet fury. He saw the shattered window, the glass at Grace's feet. Without a word, he removed his gloves, stepped onto the porch, and said, "Nobody touches this house again. Not while we breathe." That night the Saints didn't leave. They stayed, forming a circle around the Parker home. The steady hum of engines filled the night air like a lullaby. Grace peeked from her window, seeing leather jackets glint under the moonlight, men stationed like guardians. Ridge sat by the gate, his hand resting on the throttle, eyes on the horizon. Tank brewed coffee from a camping stove. Lucky softly played harmonica under the stars. Grace crept outside with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered. Ridge looked down at her and smiled faintly. "Yeah, we did." She sat beside him on the porch steps. "Are you mad?" she asked softly. Ridge shook his head. "No, kid. I'm just tired of people thinking kindness makes you weak." Grace leaned against him, small and safe. "I think it makes you strong." Behind them, the engines idled in rhythm like a heartbeat. For the first time since her father died, Grace slept peacefully through the night. By morning, word had spread again, this time for the right reasons. The local news captured a photo of the Iron Saints forming that midnight guard. The headline read, "Bikers stand watch for little girl who believed in them." The image went viral. Donations flooded in for Charlie's medical bills. Strangers sent letters, thanking the Saints for protecting what mattered. When the sheriff arrived later that day, he didn't come to accuse anyone. He came to apologize. "Maybe I misjudged you," he admitted quietly to Ridge. Ridge just nodded. "We all misjudge people sometimes. What matters is what we do next." The sheriff extended a hand. Ridge shook it firm and respectful. Grace watched, eyes wide. Two men who'd stood on opposite sides of fear, now meeting halfway in peace. That evening, the Saints gathered at the Parker farm for a barbecue. Neighbors came too. Music played. Laughter returned. Grace helped Lucky flip burgers, while Ridge fixed a flat tire for the schoolteacher's car. "You turned this place into something different," her mom said, her voice full of gratitude. Ridge smiled. "Nah, she did that." He nodded toward Grace, her face glowing in the firelight. "She's the reason we remembered who we really are." Summer melted into autumn, and the world kept moving. Charlie's health improved. His laugh filled the house again. Grace started a small fundraiser called Cookies for Change. sending boxes of her cookies to biker clubs across the country, each one with a note that read, "From one road angel to another." Months later, the Iron Saints rode out together for the last charity event of the season. The lineup stretched down the highway, more than 100 bikes, engines roaring in perfect harmony. Grace rode with Ridge, holding on tight as the wind whipped through her hair. She looked back and saw the long trail of riders behind them, chrome and leather glinting under the morning sun like an unbroken chain of loyalty. "Ridge?" she asked over the wind.
Yeah, kid.
"Are you still going to come by when winter comes?" Ridge smirked under his helmet. "Every time you bake," she laughed. "Then you better buy a freezer, 'cause I'm not stopping." Ridge's laughter echoed with hers as the convoy thundered toward the horizon, loud, fearless, alive. A year later, the Parker farm had a new barn sign. Iron Saints on a stop. Cookies, coffee and family. It wasn't a clubhouse, but it became something better. A safe place for travelers. Veterans, bikers, and anyone who'd lost their way. Grace's cookies were famous now, but what people really came for was the story. The story of a girl who saw kindness in the unlikeliest of heroes. Every now and then, Ridge would stop by on his Harley, parking beneath the old oak tree. He'd take out the burnt cookie she gave him that first day, still sealed in a small glass case he carried on his bike. "For luck," he always said. Grace would smile and hand him a fresh batch. "You don't need luck anymore," she'd tell him. "You've got family. Before we end this story, let me ask you something. Would you have been brave enough to knock on a biker's door and see past the leather and tattoos? If this story reminded you that kindness can come from anyone, no matter how they look, then like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the strongest hearts ride on two wheels, and the smallest hands can change the biggest lives.